I thought Dad's retirement party was just another night of polite HOA applause and small talk about lawn fertilizer. Then my brother-in-law grabbed the mic inside the Crestmont HOA clubhouse, accusing me of secretly flipping our family home for profit and violating every covenant on the books. I stood frozen as a contractor in mud-caked work boots marched straight through the double doors, demanding the owner sign a demolition contract for 8 o'clock tonight. That was the exact second I realized they weren't just trying to shame me in front of the entire neighborhood. They were trying to bulldoze my property while the whole room cheered like it was community service. My name is Evelyn Murphy. But tonight, in the glow of string lights and the scent of starch and old money, I was simply the other daughter, the one who flew in from Chicago, the guest star in the long-running reality show of the Keller family inside Sunnyvale Crestmont HOA. I stood near the mahogany bar at the edge of the ballroom, nursing a gin and tonic that had gone watery 20 minutes ago. The clubhouse was exactly as I remembered from childhood visits, except the dues were higher and the rules thicker. Outside the floor-to-ceiling windows, Georgia humidity pressed against the manicured lawns, but inside everything was climate-controlled to a crisp 68 degrees, the temperature of passive-aggressive perfection. The room was a sea of white linen tablecloths and navy blazers. Every guest a dues-paying member of Crestmont, HOA Graham, and Tessa moved through the crowd like a political power couple campaigning for re-election to the board. Tessa looked radiant in silk that probably cost more than my first car. She had that specific Keller smile, wide, engaging, but stopping just short of the eyes. Graham was the anchor, corporate lawyer turned HOA board president, his hand possessively on the small of her back, steering her toward the people who mattered. Every gesture was choreographed. A touch here, a synchronized nod there. They projected absolute marital and social solidity. If you didn't look closely, you'd think they were the happiest couple enforcing covenants in the neighborhood. Efficiency is one word for it, Evan Shaw said beside me, placing his empty glass on the bar. Evan was my companion for the weekend, the brilliant macroeconomist my family couldn't quite categorize. Efficiency is one word, I replied, keeping my voice low. I was thinking they look like they're selling something. Evan adjusted his cuffs, eyes tracking Graham. Everyone is selling something, Evelyn. In this room, they're selling the concept of legacy. Your father is the product. Tessa and Graham are the marketing team. And the currency is validation. I took a sip of my diluted drink. Evan was right. He saw the math where everyone else saw melodrama. And what am I in this model? I asked. You're the external auditor, he said softly. You see the books are cooked, but you have no jurisdiction, yet. That hit closer than he realized. From my vantage point, I watched Dad holding court near the head table. At 70, he still looked like the renowned heart surgeon, silver hair swept back, posture rigid. The crowd told him how much the hospital would miss him. They didn't know about the tremors. They didn't know about the bad investments that had drained his pension. They saw the legend. They didn't see the man terrified of becoming irrelevant. My family's biography for me was always the same. Evelyn lives in Chicago. She's doing her own thing. Mom would wave her hand vaguely, as if Chicago were an Arctic outpost. Here in the clubhouse, none of my real life existed. I co-founded Blue Hollow Design Group, an architectural firm specializing in sustainable urban regeneration. We had 40 employees, major contracts, design awards. But at Crestmont HOA, I was still the daughter who failed to launch in the ways that mattered. Unmarried, no grandchildren, career treated like a hobby. Earth to Evelyn, Evan whispered. The ambient music faded. A spotlight swept the floor. It's time for the speeches, I said, stomach tightening. Mom took the stage first, thanking everyone for coming, speaking about Dad's dedication. Safe. Then Dad. The applause was thunderous. He thanked Elaine, thanked Tessa for being right down the street, organizing everything, making sure they were taken care of. The room applauded warmly. Tessa dabbed at her eye with expert humility. Then Dad scanned the back of the room until he found me. And Evelyn, he said, "Thank you for flying in." That was it. To the next chapter. The room echoed. Thank you for flying in. Not for the checks I sent when the roof leaked. Not for handling insurance when Mom got confused. Just for occupying a plane's seat. A masterclass in erasure. Tessa was the essential daughter. I was the visitor. Evan's hand brushed my elbow. Silent check-in. I could have been angry once. But I was 38 now. I ran a company that navigated Chicago zoning wars. I felt cold crystal clarity instead. I decided I would not engage. I would simply witness. But the night was not over. "Excuse me." Tessa's voice rang out over the speakers. The crowd quieted. This wasn't on the schedule. Graham hovered behind her like a shadow. "We have one more thing to say," Tessa said, flushed. Graham took the mic, adjusting his tie. The affable son-in-law mask was still in place, but something sharper lurked underneath. The silence that fell was different, the silence of anticipation. Graham stood center stage. "We wanted to make a special announcement tonight. A gift, really. A promise to Ray and Elaine." The guests leaned forward. Everyone loved a generous HOA president. "We all know what this family and this community means," Graham continued. "In retirement, the most important thing is peace. Stability. Holding on to the places where our memories live." Evan shifted beside me. "He's pivoting," he whispered. "Watch the hands." Graham's expression turned grave. Unfortunately, not everyone shares that vision of stability. Sometimes the modern world and the pursuit of quick profit invades the sanctity of the home. He turned slowly until he faced me directly. The eyes of 150 HOA members followed. "We found out this week," Graham said, voice heavy with sorrow, "that the family home of Harlow Point is being prepared for a quick sale. A flip, as they call it. Where Tessa took her first steps. Where Ray taught us all to fish. The heart of this family, in this neighborhood. And we learned to our heartbreak that Evelyn intends to gut it, renovate it, and sell it to the highest bidder before summer ends." The room gasped. It was a lie constructed with malicious precision. Graham wasn't finished. "We tried to speak to her privately," he said, "but the contractors are already lined up. The schedule is set. Apparently, childhood memories are just overhead costs." He pointed straight at me. "Evelyn, I know real estate is cutthroat in Chicago, but this is your father's retirement. This is your mother's sanctuary. You're flipping their history for a check and violating every Crestmont HOA covenant on property flips and aesthetic continuity in the process." All heads turned. I felt the weight of their judgment like a physical blow. These were the same neighbors who had monitored my prom dresses and college applications. Now they looked at me like a vulture. Tessa stepped up, voice breaking. "We just want you to stop, Evie. Please. Mama's been crying all week. Money makes people cold." The murmurs grew. "That's terrible." She always was the distant one. My heart hammered, but I didn't scream. I didn't storm out. I knew Graham was waiting for the explosion. If I raged, I was the hysterical daughter. If I cried, I admitted guilt. It was a perfectly designed social guillotine, wrapped in HOA covenant language. Evan leaned close. "They're not just shaming you. Listen to the phrasing. Contractors lined up, schedule set. He's building public justification for an intervention. He's crowdfunding moral authority from the entire board and neighborhood." The clarity returned. Graham wasn't doing drama for drama's sake. He was arguing Pike versus Murphy in the court of HOA public opinion. I picked up my clutch and stepped away from the bar with the same measured pace I used entering hostile boardrooms. The crowd parted like I carried contagion. I stopped 10 feet from the stage. "Graham," I said, voice projecting clearly without a mic, "you've said a lot of words about profit, flipping, and contractors. Facts require proof. If I'm selling a property, there's a listing agreement. If I'm flipping it, there are permits. If I'm violating HOA covenants, show the violation notice with my signature." I let the silence stretch. "So what paperwork are you basing this on? Show me the deed. Show me the listing." Graham's smile didn't falter, but his eyes tightened. He He hadn't expected procedural questions at a retirement party. Paperwork, he scoffed into the mic, shaking his head at the crowd. This is exactly the problem, Evelyn. You look at a home and you see paperwork. We are family and neighbors. Who needs paperwork to know the truth? That's a very convenient answer, I replied. But in the real world, Graham, and under Crestmont HOA rules, you cannot accuse someone of covenant violation unless you have seen the signature on the sales order. The room was deathly silent. Graham leaned over the stage. The point is you have abandoned the values of this family and this neighborhood. Tonight, we're drawing a line. We are not going to let you liquidate Ray's legacy for your balance sheet. Who is we? I asked calmly. The people who actually care, Tessa interjected, stepping forward. The people who stayed and actually serve on the HOA board, Evelyn. The crowd murmured agreement. Graham's emotional appeal was stronger than my logic. To them, my request for paperwork just proved I was cold and calculating. But I had what I wanted. He had admitted in front of 150 witnesses he had no actual documentation. So you have nothing, I said. You have a microphone and a story, but no proof. Graham started to reply, but at that exact moment, the double oak doors at the back of the clubhouse slammed open with a violent crack. Every head turned. Standing in the doorway was a man who looked like he had walked out of a different universe. Heavy steel-toed work boots caked with dried mud, faded Carhartt pants, high-visibility neon yellow vest over a stained hoodie, battered clipboard in one hand, smartphone in the other. He looked angry. He looked impatient. And he definitely did not have a Crestmont HOA membership card. A waiter tried to intercept him. Sir, you cannot come in here. This is a private event. The man brushed past with the casual strength of someone who moved drywall for a living. Mud tracks marked the polished parquet like evidence. I don't care about your party, he shouted, voice rough. I have a crew waiting and a schedule to keep. Which one of you is Evelyn Murphy? Graham froze on stage. The smirk dropped like a stone. I turned slowly. I didn't know the man, but I knew exactly what he represented. The paperwork had arrived. Chaos swept the ballroom. Guests clutched pearls. The club manager rushed forward with security. But while the room fixated on the shouting contractor, I moved. I had maybe 60 seconds before social order reasserted itself. I steered Mom into a decorative alcove near the emergency exit. Mom, I said, voice low and level, look at me. Where are the papers for the house at Harlow Point? She blinked, confused. The deed, the title insurance, the original purchase agreement, the documents that prove who actually owns the land. Well, they're in the safety deposit box at First National, she stammered. Where they've always been. When was the last time you opened that box? She hesitated. I don't know, a while ago. Why does it matter? We bought that house 30 years ago. It's our house. Everyone in the HOA knows it's our house. Everyone knowing, I repeated, tasting the bitterness, is not legal standing, Mom. And under HOA covenants, ownership matters more than neighborhood gossip. Before she could answer, Graham appeared, flanked by Tessa. Is everything all right here? He asked, sweating despite the perfect air conditioning. I apologize for the disruption. Obviously, a scheduling error. I'll go speak to that gentleman and clear it up. Why don't you get a drink, Evelyn? You look tense. I'm not tense, I said. I'm curious. You said on stage that contractors are lined up. Schedule is set. Permits pulled 2 months ago. Board approved the plans last week. Harlow Point is in a coastal preservation zone. You need a demolition permit to touch anything structural. You need a zoning variance. You need a notice of commencement filed with the county clerk and the property owner of record's notarized signature. Graham rolled his eyes. Always the technician, aren't you? Yes, Evelyn, of course it's all handled. I have power of attorney for Ray. I signed on his behalf. Did you? I asked. Because Mom just told me the deed hasn't been touched in years. Which means you didn't check the title before you filed those permits under HOA Enforcement Authority. I don't need to check the title on a house the family has owned since 1990, Graham scoffed. If you filed a permit application listing Raymond and Elaine Keller as the owners, I said slowly. Then you filed a false government document. That's perjury. But that's the best case scenario, where you're just incompetent. There's a second scenario, Graham. The scenario where you did check the title, saw the name on the deed was not Keller, and filed anyway. That's identity theft. That's fraud. That's a felony, and a direct violation of the very HOA covenants you love to preach. Tessa hissed, stepping between us. Why are you trying to ruin this? He's doing this for Mom and Dad. Is it? I asked as locked on Graham. When you filled out that application, whose name did you sign? He couldn't answer. If he said Dad's, he ignored the actual title. If he said mine or my LLC's, he admitted impersonation. The trap snapped shut. You didn't think anyone would check, I said quietly. You thought you could bulldoze the house, flip the land, pocket the cash before anyone realized the title had transferred 4 years ago. You were banking on Mom and Dad being old and trusting, and me being far away in Chicago. But you forgot one thing, Graham. I'm the external auditor, and I've been watching. The contractor, whose name I would soon learn was Cal Morrison, had grown tired of the manager's excuses. He turned his full, frustrated attention toward Graham. Finally, are you the one who keeps emailing me at 2 in the morning? The room went silent again. I stood next to Mom, holding her hand. Watch, I told her softly. Just watch. I'm Evelyn Murphy, I said clearly, stepping forward. Cal looked me up and down, skepticism in every line on his face. You're the one who's been emailing me since Tuesday. I have a crew waiting. You said the buyer wanted the back of the house opened up before inspection Monday. He thrust his phone at me. Read it. I took the phone. The sender displayed as Evelyn Murphy, Blue Hollow Projects. But the actual address was a generic Gmail. Evelyn Murphydesens 85@gmail.com. My official company email was a secure corporate domain. I had never used Gmail for business. The text was concise and commanding. Proceed with demolition of the rear sunroom and removal of structural beams. Need this done fast. Meet at Crestmont Club at 8 o'clock tonight to sign final authorization. I looked up at Cal. When is this work scheduled to start? Tomorrow morning, 7 a.m., Cal said. My crew is loaded up. We're supposed to take down the screen porch and strip the siding off the south wall. A collective gasp went through the room. Tomorrow, my mother whispered behind me. But the summer house. I handed the phone back. Mr. Morrison, I did not write that email. That is not my email address, and I did not authorize any demolition. In fact, under Crestmont HOA covenants, no such work can be performed without the actual owner's consent, and I am the actual owner. Cal's face hardened. He realized he had almost been made an accessory to a crime. Well, somebody authorized it, he said, waving his clipboard. I have a signed contract right here, digital signature, IP address traced to this zip code, and a $10,000 deposit that cleared yesterday. I turned to Graham. He looked like a man watching his life burn in real time. This is ridiculous, he said to the room. Mr. Morrison is clearly confused. There are many Evelyn Murphys. This is obviously a phishing scam. He reached for the clipboard. Cal pulled it back. Don't touch my paperwork. I pulled the permits myself at the county clerk's office Tuesday. It's stamped with the official seal. He flipped the page and turned the clipboard so the room could see. The property at 42 Shoreline Drive is not owned by Raymond Keller. It hasn't been for 4 years. The owner of record is Harlow Point Holdings, LLC, and the sole managing member of that LLC is Evelyn Murphy. The silence shattered. Whispers erupted. She owns it. He said she was stealing it. For years. Graham looked as if he had been shot. The narrative of the greedy, distant daughter had just been obliterated by a man in dirty boots holding public record. That's a lie. Tessa screamed, rushing forward, tears no longer for show. Tell him it's a lie, Graham. Tell him Daddy owns the house. Graham couldn't speak. Dad stood at the head table, gripping the tablecloth, face ashen. Evelyn, he asked, voice weak, is that true? I looked only at my father. Yes, Dad. I bought the house 4 years ago when you had the second surgery. When the insurance capped out and the hospital bills were eating your pension, I bought the asset, put the money into your trust fund, and leased it back to you for $1 a year so you wouldn't feel like you lost anything. I didn't tell you because I didn't want you to feel like a burden. I didn't want you to know I was the one paying for your recovery. Tessa gasped. You paid everything? Yes, I said. The house, the taxes, the insurance, the new roof last year that Graham claimed he fixed. I paid the invoice. I turned back to Graham. So when you stand on that stage and tell these people I'm flipping the house for profit and violating HOA covenants, you are lying. But when you tell this contractor to tear down the structural beams of a house you do not own, that is not lying, Graham. That is criminal trespass. And since you used a fake email to impersonate me and sign a contract in my name, that is also forgery. Cal looked at the clipboard, then at Graham. You told me you had power of attorney. You told me the owner was incapacitated. I'm the owner, I interrupted, voice sharp. And I'm standing right here, fully capable, telling you that if one of your men touches a single shingle on that roof, I will sue your company into the ground. Cal held up his hands. Well, lady, I'm not the bad guy. I was hired. I have a contract. You have a fraudulent contract signed by a man committing identity theft, I said. I suggest you look at the signature again. Cal flipped to the signature page. Then he pulled out his phone and dialed the number listed on the contract. A phone began to ring, loud and clear in the silence. It was coming from Graham's jacket pocket. Graham slapped his hand over it, trying to mute the cheerful generic ringtone. But it was too late. The sound had already indicted him. That's my number, Cal said, holding up his screen. I'm calling the client right now. Answer it, Graham, I said softly. He didn't. He let it ring until voicemail. The silence that followed was suffocating. Mom was sobbing into her napkin. Tessa stared at her husband like a stranger. And I stood there, watching the hero dissolve. Mr. Morrison, I said, turning back to Cal, I apologize for your wasted time. I will reimburse you for the trip charge, but that demolition order is canceled effective immediately. Cal nodded, looking at Graham with disgust. You're lucky she's stopping me, because if I had swung a hammer tomorrow, I would have leaned on you so fast your head would spin. He tucked his phone away. I'm keeping the deposit. For the aggravation. He turned to leave, boots crunching, but the damage was done. The beautiful party was dead. The retirement celebration had become a crime scene. I looked at the crowd. They were no longer judging me. They were terrified of the truth I had just exposed. Now, I said, turning to my family, I think it's time we talked about why the HOA board president needs to sell my house so badly that he's willing to risk prison for it. The ringing had stopped, but the silence was deafening. Graham stood frozen, hands hovering over his pocket. I stepped into that vacuum. Let us be very clear about what happened 4 years ago, I said, addressing the room, but keeping my eyes on Mom. Because memory seems to be a selective luxury inside Crestmont HOA. I walked to the nearest table, picked up a glass of water, took a sip. Then I turned to Elaine. Mom, do you remember the winter Dad had his second bypass? The one where insurance denied the rehab facility? You called me at 2 a.m., hysterical. You said you were going to have to take a second mortgage on the house, but the bank wouldn't approve fast enough. I told you not to worry. I would handle it. But I didn't just wire money. You're too proud for charity. So we made a deal. A business deal. We met at the law offices of Henderson and Clark on February 12th, 4 years ago. I established Harlow Point Holdings, LLC specifically for this transaction. I bought the house from you and Dad for full appraised value plus 20%. That money paid for Dad's rehab. It paid off the mortgage. It funded the trust you're living on right now. Elaine covered her mouth. I remember signing the papers, but we agreed it was just a formality. Nothing would change. I leased it back to you for $1 a year, I said gently. I told you as far as the world was concerned, it was still your house. I did that to protect your pride, so you could stand at HOA parties and not feel like you had lost everything. But legal ownership transferred that day. The deed is in the name of my company. And that means only I can authorize a sale. Only I can authorize demolition. And under Crestmont HOA covenants, no board president can override that without committing fraud. Tessa let out a half sob. Why didn't you tell me? We're sisters. Because you never asked, I said. You were too busy enforcing rules with Graham. Graham found his voice again in the hotel suite the next morning, but it was cracking. This is revisionist history, he insisted. I was trying to get the project moving for Ray and Elaine. I knew you were busy in Chicago. I thought I was helping. Helping, I repeated. By ordering the destruction of structural beams? That's not helping, Graham. That's HOA tyranny disguised as family service. It was a renovation strategy, he insisted, conviction gone. I thought if we cleared the old structure, the land value would skyrocket. I was going to surprise everyone with the proceeds. It was a lapse in judgment regarding the paperwork. I admit that. But the intent was pure. The intent was theft, I said, leaning over the table. But I'm not a prosecutor today. I'm a sister-in-law giving you a very narrow window to save yourself. I slid a single sheet across. This is a list of immediate actions. Item 1. You will go to the county clerk Monday at 8 a.m. and formally withdraw the demolition permit application, citing administrative error regarding the applicant. Item 2. You will write a formal letter of apology to the county planning board and blind copy me. Item 3. You will send a cease and desist notice to Cal Morrison and any other contractor you contacted. Graham stared at the list. If I send a letter admitting I filed unauthorized paperwork, that's an admission of guilt. The ethics board could see it. I could lose my bar license. You should have thought about your license before you forged my signature, I said coldly. You have two choices. Report yourself for a clerical error and hope they let you off with a slap. Or I file a police report for identity theft and fraud this afternoon. The police won't call it clerical. They'll call it crime scene. Tessa stood abruptly. You can't do this. He's my husband. He's the father of your nieces. If he loses his license, how are we supposed to live? You're destroying this family over a house. She looked at Mom. Tell her she's being cruel. Mom's face crumpled. Evie, honey, maybe there's another way. We don't want the police involved. Think of the scandal. I looked at them both. The pattern was so entrenched. Protect the appearance, protect the man, sacrifice the truth to keep the HOA peace. I'm not the one destroying the family, Tessa. I am the one preventing a crime from being completed in our name. He stole $10,000 from Dad's medical trust to pay for a demolition I didn't authorize. He was going to bulldoze the house we grew up in. Do you really think he was going to stop there? Do you think a man who forges his sister-in-law's signature and abuses his position as HOA board president is a safe person to trust with your future? Dad stood up then, frail, but eyes sharp with clinical detachment. What else have you done, Graham? Nothing, Graham said too quickly. Ray, I swear it's just the house. I just needed a win. A big liquidity event. Why did you need liquidity? Evan asked from the corner, voice dry and academic. A capital call doesn't make you commit felony forgery. You don't burn down a $2 million asset to pay a $40,000 bill. You only take a risk that big if the hole you're in is even bigger. Evan walked toward the table. People usually flip family assets in a panic for one of two reasons: gambling debt or a lawsuit they're trying to settle before it goes public. Graham flinched. Tessa whispered, Graham, what lawsuit? There is no lawsuit, he snapped. But I had already pulled up the public portal of the Fulton County Superior Court on my laptop. Case number 23, CV 490, I read aloud. Plaintiff Sterling Bridge Capital. Defendant Graham Pike. Judgment entered 3 months ago for $450,000 plus interest. Tessa gasped. Evan continued. Sterling Bridge is a predatory private equity lender. High risk, short-term loans for professionals who can't get traditional money. Interest rates that eat souls. You borrowed $500,000 from loan sharks. It was an investment, Graham burst out. I had a tip on commercial rezoning in Atlanta. It was supposed to double in 6 months. The council voted it down. The money evaporated. But Sterling Bridge doesn't care. They have a personal guarantee and a deadline. So you decided to sell mine, I said quietly. The buyer wanted a shovel-ready lot. No demolition costs, no waiting. That's why you pushed Cal to start at 7 a.m. Sunday. And the drama at the party? You needed a cover story. You needed a villain. That's why you attacked me on stage. Classic projection. You accused me of exactly what you were doing. You wanted the entire HOA to believe I was the greedy one, so when the house suddenly accidentally got demolished, everyone would assume it was my fault. Graham didn't deny it. He couldn't. The logic was airtight. Tessa looked at him with dawning horror. You used me. You made me get on that stage and cry. You made me attack my own sister just so you could rob us. She backed away. Don't touch me. Mom spoke, voice weak but clear. We let this happen. We were so proud of him. The successful lawyer, the perfect son-in-law, the HOA president. We gave him the keys because we didn't want to look at the books ourselves. And we ignored you, Evelyn. We let him paint you as the outsider. Dad walked to the window, then turned back. You have 24 hours to vacate my house, Graham. You will not sleep under my roof tonight. The verbal agreement we reached in the hotel suite was fragile. Graham had agreed to sign the confession and let me buy his debt, but until the ink was dry, he was still dangerous. I spent the next 3 hours building an electrified fence. I hired James Thorne, a real estate litigation attorney completely unconnected to the Crestmont social web. I had cease and desist orders couriered to Graham's home and office. I filed a notice of fraudulent impersonation with the county building department. I emailed every major demolition contractor in the county attaching my deed and warning that any contract signed by Graham Pike was void. I locked Cal Morrison's testimony in a sworn affidavit. At 4 p.m., we met in James Thorne's sterile conference room. Graham, Tessa, and my parents arrived looking like a funeral procession. James slid the thick documents across the granite table. Irrevocable power of attorney revocation, confession of judgment, debt assumption agreement. Graham tried one last maneuver. Before I sign, let's look at the logistics. I have a buyer lined up. $600,000 wired Monday. If you sign a limited representation agreement, I can close the deal for you. We sell the land. I pay you back immediately. It's cleaner. James laid a single sheet down. We ran a background check on your buyer. The purchasing entity is Northside Ventures. The registered agent is Peter Pike, your brother. You were selling my client's property at half market value to your brother, so you too could split the remaining equity after paying your loan sharks. Graham's face went gray. Cal Morrison, sitting in the corner, spoke up. You called me 5 times last night. You left a voicemail saying, just get the machines on site. I'll double the deposit if you start before sunrise. You said if that house isn't gone by Monday, the deal dies and you're dead. The room exploded. Tessa stood so fast her chair fell over. You were going to bulldoze the place where we grew up and use me as a human shield. She walked out without looking back. Dad stood. Take my name off everything. You wore my reputation like armor. Take it off. He placed a heavy hand on my shoulder. Finish it, Evelyn. Graham slumped. You're stripping me of everything. I'm stripping you of the illusions you used to hide, I said. You keep your license. You keep your freedom. That's more than you deserve. Sign the confession. Sign the debt assumption, or I pick up this phone and call the district attorney. His hand shook, but he signed. James notarized on the spot. It is done. Graham stood like a man who had survived a crash, but hadn't yet realized he was bleeding. She will never forgive you, he whispered about Tessa. I didn't destroy your marriage, I said calmly. I just turned on the lights. You were the one holding the sledgehammer. He walked out. In the parking garage that evening, my parents and Tessa waited by Dad's car. No applause. No dramatic reconciliation. Just the heavy silence of a family reset into a new shape. Is it done? Tessa asked, eyes red. It's done, I said. He signed. The debt is contained. The house is safe. We're going home, Dad said. Are you coming, Evelyn? I looked at them. For years, I had wanted to be inside that circle. No, I said. I have a flight in the morning. I have a company to run. I stood in front of them, claiming my space. The house at Harlow Point will be locked tomorrow. I'm hiring a new contractor for actual repairs, no demolition. But hear me clearly. That house is not a family commons. It is not a fallback asset. It is not a prop for your social standing or HOA bragging rights. It is my property. I bought it. I saved it. I own it. From today on, anyone who wants to call it the family home needs to start by respecting the landlord. I turned and walked to my rental car. I didn't look back. I didn't need to. For the first time in my life, they weren't looking at the invisible daughter. They were looking at Evelyn Murphy. And they finally knew exactly who I was. Thank you for listening to this HOA Karen takedown. Drop a comment with where you're watching from and tell me, have you ever been on the wrong side of an overzealous HOA board? Hit like, subscribe, and share if you love seeing power-hungry bullies get the justice they deserve. See you in the next neighborhood nightmare.